launched the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Our visuals teams have led the way in covering the war in Gaza, winning a Pulitzer Prize in the process. Many of the award-winning journalists and the scoop-getting reporters are in this audience, so I really urge you to seek them out today as the day progresses, because they have some incredible stories. Along with so many people in this region, we have also suffered. We've lost 2 journalists, Issam Abdallah and Hussam al-Masri, since the beginning of Israel's war in Gaza, both to Israeli fire. Our journalists in Gaza and their families have endured tremendous hardship while they were bearing witness for the world. Some of them are here today, actually. A piece of my own heart will always be buried in this region. But today, we're here to talk about what is next. And so, to kick us off, I have the pleasure of introducing our host city partner, the Abu Dhabi Department of Economic Development. Please join me in welcoming the Undersecretary of ADED, His Excellency Hamad Sayyad Al-Mazrouei.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning and welcome to Abu Dhabi. It's a great honor to the inaugural Reuters NEXT Gulf, a global dialogue among leaders shaping the future of our economies, industries, and societies. And here in Abu Dhabi, a city that bridges East and West, we stand at the crossroads of ideas and investments, trade and technology, purpose and progress. And this gathering comes at a defining moment. The world looks at Abu Dhabi not only as a source of energy, but a source of insight and innovation, reimagining how economies grow and how societies prosper sustainability. Our transformation is guided by the vision of the Falcon economy, an economy defined by diversification, resilience, and global connectivity, and across sectors such as advanced manufacturing, clean energy, and financial services. We are creating engines of growth that will define competitiveness for decades to come. Progress, however, cannot be achieved in isolation. It is through collaboration across borders and ideas that can address global challenges and unlock shared opportunities. Today, we proudly welcome Thomson Reuters, a trusted global institution that has served in the Middle East for more than 160 years, connecting information, ideas, and people. Your decision to bring the Reuters Next platform to Abu Dhabi reflects our shared belief in the power of dialogue to shape a more inclusive and informed world. As a host today, Abu Dhabi offers more than a venue. It offers a vision where innovation is inclusive, opportunity is borderless, and where prosperity is shared. Distinguished guests, thank you for being part of this important global conversation. Your insights, leadership, and collaboration will help define the agenda for a more inclusive and resilient future. We look forward to the ideas that will emerge and to the partnership that will begin right here in Abu Dhabi, the capital of capital. I would like also to extend my sincere appreciation to Reuters for bringing this remarkable global platform to Abu Dhabi. And through your dedication to fostering dialogue and sharing insights, you continue to connect ideas and people and opportunities that shape a more prosperous future. And last, thank you and welcome once again Reuters Next to Abu Dhabi. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Your Excellency. Thank you, Alessandra, as well, for your introduction. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank in advance all of our speakers joining us today from across the region and indeed further afield. It is thanks to you, of course, that we've been able to pull together such a compelling event. I'm going to keep this very tight. I want to add my welcome to all of you in the room, to the millions watching online. My name is Axel Threlfall. I'm editor-at-large at Reuters, and it'll be my job to guide you through today's exciting and carefully curated program. I think the difficulty we face is not finding things to talk about. What is much harder, I think, is deciding what to cover, what to prioritize in such a very busy news agenda. I do hope you leave feeling we've made the right choices. Very quickly, we've split the day into 3 themes. This morning, leadership and geopolitics. We'll then move to economic strength and global markets. After lunch, we'll turn our focus to business leadership and corporate strategy, as well as opportunities and challenges associated with AI transformation and sustainability. You can ask questions, and I would encourage you to ask questions of our speakers. Do take that opportunity. It's through the Slido app. There should be a QR code. It will pop it up on the screen throughout the morning. Just take a picture of that and ask your questions. It really is as easy as it sounds. So lots to get our teeth into. Let's get started. We start with the prospects for stability and prosperity here in the Middle East and the view from the UAE. We're thrilled to have with us His Excellency Dr. Anwar Gargash, diplomatic advisor to the President, previously the UAE's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. Reuters editor-in-chief Alessandra Galloni will lead that conversation. Your Excellency, Alessandra, please come on up to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. It is really a pleasure for us to be able to talk to you in this incredibly pivotal moment for the region. So a lot of our conversation is going to be, of course, about peace in Gaza. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, I would just like your perspective on, after 2 years of war, 2 years of turmoil, devastation, just give us a sense of what that has wrought, of your perspective on where we are right now, here and in the region.
Thank you. First of all, I have to say I'm really delighted and honored to be invited here. I want to say, Alessandra, that this is, to encapsulate the moment, this is definitely a moment of opportunity and a moment of peril. It depends what we do with it. And when I say what we do with it, it's a whole set of actors. It's the countries in the region, it is the international community, it's U.S. leadership, and it is also the combatants themselves, whether these combatants are Israel or Iran or some of the militias that played an outsized role in the conflict in the region. I think the first thing to say is opportunity, because we do really have a chance today to change course. The war that started on the 7th of October was because of a certain trajectory, a certain course. And now we have an opportunity really to address that. Now, to address that, we need to do things differently. Failed deterrence policies are no longer valid and they should not be reincarnated. Maximalist views on the Palestinian issue are no longer valid. We have to address the issue that we really have two contending nationalisms fighting for one piece of land, and that land has to be divided, for example. I think also from the Gulf perspective, we are offering the region, and especially here in the UAE, we feel we're offering also the region an alternative model, a model of development that is changing gear from what I would call geopolitics to geoeconomy and now to geotechnology through what we are doing. Now, the peril side is also very worrying because you will have actors who will act as if nothing happened in the last 2 years. And this includes Israel, it includes other players, Iran, the Hamas or Hezbollah or others. So this will actually be a repeat of a failed policy, really, that has actually resulted in where we are. I think other than that, we have also long-term concerns. Now, you mentioned Iraq in your opening remarks, and if you think about it, the collapse of the Saddam regime in Iraq brought about major changes that took a few years to percolate. And I think here also we really have a lot of things to watch. I can't believe that 2 years of war will not leave its scars and bring its opportunities. And I think that we have to be really asking ourselves some major questions. Some of these questions are we going to continue with this sort of maximalist views on how to address the Palestinian issue, for example, by the Israeli right, which has to understand that this is not going to go away. I think the other issues also, we've had 30 years of the trajectory of political Islam. And political Islam was the main combatant here in the 2 years of war. Is this really an early indicator that the trajectory of political Islam is actually coming at an apex and will actually slide down? There are many issues, many questions. From the Gulf perspective, the Gulf has played a very positive and outsized role also in what's going on. So how is that also going to shape up as a result of this geostrategic earthquake that we see? So really a moment of opportunity and a moment of peril.
Opportunity and peril, absolutely. Well, let's jump into some of the details then, touching upon what you said. So, as you mentioned, I mean, the UAE has been absolutely pivotal in the peace negotiations in the Gaza war. In Sharm el-Sheikh, for example, the U.S. President Donald Trump pinpointed your country as being key for the peace plan success and the future of Gaza. What are you doing to ensure that the ceasefire holds and that the plan is implemented?
Okay. Well, there are things that we do collectively. I mean, at the end of the day, we are part of an overall Arab and international vision of a two-state solution. So the UAE will not veer away from this Arab and international vision that there has to be security for Israel, true, but at the same time, a viable Palestinian state. We have issues about reform, about how things should be managed, but it does not, contradict that part. I think, on the other hand, the UAE has played really an outsized role in the humanitarian side. I mean, in the last 2 years, we've spent $2.57 billion on Gaza aid. This is close to almost 46% of all aid reaching Gaza. If you really want to break it down, we've had 100,000 tons of food and medical equipment going to Gaza. Our water lines from Egypt to Rafah basically, cover 1 million people in Gaza. It's given us a lot of things to do on the humanitarian, and I think we will scale up. Now, having said that, it's not only because the UAE is generous. It's also the UAE has been able to leverage its relations with Israel in order to use that access. If we had no relationship with Israel, we wouldn't have been able to bring 3,000 Palestinians and their children and their families here, for example.
And you raise an interest,
Yeah.
This is a key part, and we're going to get into this
important
relationship.
Yeah.
But so this begs the question, what did you tell Prime Minister Netanyahu in New York in private that got him to accept the peace plan?
Well, Sheikh Abdullah saw Prime Minister Netanyahu at the
You were in that meeting, I believe.
Well, at the most difficult time. And I think this was also a very difficult position, a difficult decision to take. But I think, our position was clear. We were very adamant about any annexation. Any threatened annexation, I think the UAE was mobilized immediately with the Americans, with the Israelis, that any annexation will actually be a red line for the UAE. I mean, again, we will not discuss what it entails because I think we've averted that. But I think at the same time, it was also a push in order to reach that, the Trump agreement or the American agreement.
So we're jumping a little bit ahead here because you've mentioned this red line, but would a violation of that, what is that red line for you, lead to an end of the Abrahamic Accords?
Again, it's like somebody holding his cards close to his chest. I think we have a lot of options, but I think this did not happen. So I think it'll be speculation right now.
You don't think it would happen?
I think right now we have averted that, and I think the concentration now is to make the Gaza plan work, and especially its second part now.
And so what is the specific role that you have in governing and reconstructing Gaza?
Well, again, we want to help in every way we can in resolving one of the thorniest, most difficult, most problematic issues in the region. So really, it depends. I mean, we've said it also, maybe not very clearly publicly, but I think the UAE role will be very flexible based on what is the horizon. If we see a clear horizon to a long-term Palestinian state, then of course our role will expand. And we will, put all our efforts and all our capabilities within the international community to support that. But I think if we don't see that, we will continue to help, but I see that our role will be more humanitarian and more in the negotiating side, because everybody has to see sense. It's only the extremists on both sides, whether it is the Arab side or whether it's the Israeli side, that just don't understand that you have to address contending aspirations of two nationalisms. And that means two states.
So just going back to what you just said, so are the Emiratis happy to be part of, for example, an international stabilization force?
Well, again, I mean, many of the items that you have seen in the plan, our Foreign Minister, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, has been a key player behind the scene in these items and has been really in various negotiations and discussions and sort of, ideas going back and forth. So we want to help, but again, you need to understand we need a longer-term view that ensures that we will actually see a Palestinian state. Containment and a reversal to 6th of October will not help anybody. We really need to look at what has happened, and what has happened is an earthquake, and to take it from there. So again, I mean, the UAE will help. The UAE needs two things. It needs political clarity on where this is going, like many other countries. It's not a uniquely Emirati position. And the other thing, of course, is we will need also, operational arrangements and security, etc. You don't want to throw your kids into a battleground without clear, without clear understandings.
So if I understand then, for now, sending people on the ground is not an option then?
Well, I think it's still under negotiation. The whole thing is under negotiation.
And how much do you see the cost of reconstruction? Have you a sense of the size?
I'm sure there's a lot of more economists here who
will
give you a bigger sense. But I think it'll be massive. And I think I was talking to a Dutch colleague a couple of years ago, and after October 7th, and she told me that the Dutch rebuilt Gaza port 3 times. So no country wants to put major investments if it does not actually, humanitarian will flow in. But other than humanitarian, people want to see a long-lasting peace that actually stays, peace with hope, and peace that will actually secure Israel, but will give also the Palestinians the national state that they deserve.
So let's go back to something you said at the very beginning, which is sort of your foundation in a sense, which is the Palestinian state. But Prime Minister Netanyahu is clearly against a Palestinian state. So do you feel that there's any hope for peace with this particular government in Israel?
In every country, you have a spectrum of public opinion. And I'm not going to, reveal a secret when I tell you how many Israelis and how many non-Israeli Jews were cheering us when we took a position against the threats of annexation. So really, in this period, we have to count on moderation. And moderation here does not only mean the Israeli public opinion and moderates within it, but even within our own Arab world, where you see also people who understand that we cannot go back to where we were. We do need a path to peace. The paths to confrontation and war has actually been, catalytic on the Palestinians. And I don't think this is what we want to go back to.
And so do you think, what's the future of the Abraham Accords then? Because this seems to be a fundamental point of difference here.
No, I think the Abrahamic Accords is a very important of the jigsaw of how peace should look in the region. I think the Abrahamic Accords is a strategic agreement. It sends a message in the region. It's helped us operationally, as I said, on the humanitarian side. It's given us leverage on the issue of annexation. If we did not have the Abrahamic Accords, what are we going to come and tell Prime Minister Netanyahu and his right-wing government about annexation? Because he also feels that this is an important part of the whole jigsaw puzzle of peace. But the Abrahamic Accord on itself is one of the parts. But again, major parts have to be reached by the Israelis and Palestinians. Other parts have to be reached by Lebanon and Israel, Syria and Israel. And I think the other part, the most important part, is the self-realization that the path to confrontation has not yielded any results for the Palestinians and has not given Israel the security that it wants.
What about the Palestinian Authority? Lost credibility with the U.S. Israel clearly has shunned it. What is the role for the PA going forward?
Well, I think the role for the PA is still central. But for us in the UAE, we have spoken about the necessity, and I think at times we've been, a lonely voice really in emphasizing the need for the reform of the PA. And sometimes, we've been perhaps criticized for being a little bit too loud on the need for the reform of the PA. But right now, when you see what is happening in Gaza, you say for the Palestinian Authority to play the central role that it should. That reform is needed, and that reform is needed in various areas, amongst them, of course, financial transparency, greater governance, and, of course, responsibility at different levels of functioning. It doesn't look like it's just a central group that runs the whole thing. So I think this is a central thing. I think the Palestinian Authority realizes more and more that this is an important part. It has said publicly that it is willing to reform itself, but I think we need to see action also.
So you are in a unique position, obviously, with the ear, speaking to the Israeli government, clearly with the ear of Washington. But does the U.S. remain a reliable defense partner these days?
Well, I think the question is yes, and things are changing, if I may say so.
So yes and no, or
yes, and things are changing. Okay. I really don't know the word no. I've never used it, yani. But I think, number one, I think American leadership has been critical in basically affecting the ceasefire in Gaza. I think American leadership continues to be essential in the thorny path for what is remaining in this agreement. I think American leadership remains cardinal in arriving at a long-term understanding there. Now, where is the changing part? I think if you look at the Israeli strike on Qatar, for example, the Israeli strike on Qatar, from a UAE perspective, was not a strike on Qatar. It was really a strike on how we see Gulf security. And we see Gulf security as a connected one that starts all the way from Kuwait to Saudi Arabia, all the way to Oman. I mean, if you think about it, we went to war in Yemen basically to back Saudi Arabia, basically because of how we see Gulf security. We and Saudi Arabia supported Bahrain against attempts to disrupt the regime there in 2011, 2012, and that was mainly because we see this security as a contiguous security. So from this perspective, I think the first thing is we see security as a connected one. I think the second thing is we also look, Qatar had or has the largest base in the Gulf. But I think what it tells us that many concepts about Gulf security that were embedded and were considered givens in the 1990s are today changing. The type of conflict that we are seeing, militias that have the capability to infiltrate countries with drones and with cheap missiles, etc., it means that the American part of security remains an essential part. But the idea basically that American security is the sole part of a security architecture, I think this is something that is totally changing.
That's what's changed. I want to come back to this because you hit upon the role of the United States, and I want to come back to you. But I would like to shift away to another conflict, since you mentioned a couple of other conflicts, and that is the conflict in Sudan. And, since April 2023, the UN, media reports, American lawmakers have detailed the UAE military contributions to the Rapid Support Forces, which, of course, is one of the main parties in the conflict, and which has been implicated in genocide. The UAE has been accused of using humanitarian work as a cover to move drones and weapons from Chad, for example, to the RSF. How does the UAE assess these atrocities by the RSF? Do you think they amount to genocide?
Well, I think, Alessandra, we have two components here. I think if you want to play a constructive role in the region, you have to take the flak. You have to take the heat. I mean, the sort of accusations that we have, that are thrown at us, we've seen these accusations in Yemen. We've seen these accusations in supporting also the Palestinian population in Gaza, about our humanitarian role being a cover for other purposes. This is not new to us. So you have to take a decision. If you want to stay passive in your region, then you can protect yourself from this sort of accusation. If you want to be active in your region and be a major influencer in how this region works, then you will have all this sort of stuff thrown at you, some real, some not so real, some exaggerated. Now, coming back to our position here. Our position is very much articulated in the Quad statement, which is the United States, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the UAE. We see both parties who are leading the civil war today in Sudan, whether it is the Sudanese army or the RSF, as combatants. We are calling for an immediate ceasefire. We are calling for scaling humanitarian support. And most importantly, we don't see the future of Sudan in a military junta. We see the future in Sudan in a civilian transition. I mean, we were, to a certain extent, an odd voice in what we are saying. I mean, we had the support of the EU and we had the support of the African Union in the overall picture. But I think a lot of the flack that we are taking today, as I said, some exaggerated, some real, some not so real, basically stems from that. If you want to be a player and you want to come to the two generals and say the future of Sudan is not a military junta, expect the flack. And I think the Quad statement, which the UAE played also an important role in reaching agreement on, represents us more than anything else.
But so do you consider the RSF atrocities, would you say they amount to genocide?
We consider all the civil war really worthy of looking into and seeing what humanitarian cost is being paid. Today, I think every day that we see war extending in Sudan is, another case for the international organizations to look into, really.
And just the last question on this, so you clearly have influence there. You just talked about it, and getting flack for it. How do you leverage this influence to secure, an immediate ceasefire, to enable humanitarian aid? So how, in the specific, do you leverage this influence?
Well, I think in Sudan, on the humanitarian side, we're working on the margins because we are not allowed to go in, and conditions also in Sudan itself is not allowing us to play the role that we are playing in Gaza. It's interesting that an Israeli government is allowing us to put all this aid in Gaza, while a Sudanese general is not allowing us to do that. Very interesting, but sad. So I think what we are really trying to do here, number one, we work through the Quad and other international organizations in order to reach a ceasefire. I mean, at this point in Sudan, even without too much clarity on how the political scene will develop, we need a ceasefire. We need for people all over Sudan, in Khartoum and in Niala, to feel safe. So I think this is the essential part. I think once we are allowed to work in, I can assure you the UAE will scale up fully there. Again, you have to see also, we've been engaged in Sudan for a long time, helping in economic development, helping get Sudan during the civilian period, get out of the American sanctions, etc. So this is a long-term engagement with Sudan.
Let's go back then to something you said before, and that is really, I think, one of the themes of this conference, which is US-China, right? Yeah. I mean, the US is worried about your opening up to China. It has a fear that it could diminish your alliance with Washington. How do you balance this, right? How do you balance this bilateral relationship, especially in the context of what you said, which is that this hegemony, if you will, is changing, this reliability is changing. How do you reassure Washington?
I didn't use the word hegemony.
No, I used it.
You did, yeah. Okay. Let's just say that, okay. I think number one, we don't really hear too much about U.S. concerns for our relationship with China. I think it is more a thing of the past. I think on moving towards, a greater technological cooperation with the U.S., a lot of these ground rules are set. So I don't really see that so much as I would have said 4 years ago, 3 years ago. I think here you have a certain lag between, let's say, think tankers and between officials. So I think a lot of these things have been clarified. I mean, if you really look at the sort of technological cooperation that we are planning with the U.S., that technological cooperation would have not been possible except with a lot of clarity on a lot of issues that you alluded to. But again, other than that, I think the EU today has a great relation. EU countries today have a great relationship with the US and have great relationships with China in terms of trade, in terms of investment, etc. So why not us? I think in many ways we are, and I think our president, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, is very, very much interested, and I think a driver to understand his thinking is what I would call strategic autonomy. He understands how critical and what an anchor the US relationship is to us. But at the same time, he also understands that any successful country, emerging country like the UAE, has to have an Asia strategy, has to have a China strategy, and has to also rejuvenate relations with Europe. And I think what the UAE has also done very successfully recently is taken the plunge in Africa. And I think for many countries that are still concerned about doing business in Africa, the UAE has done that methodically. And today, the numbers, I mean, if you think we have a trade, the trade interaction with Africa is about $100 billion. And that's a huge number. And if you think about it, south of, the Sahara and south of Africa, of that is almost $60 billion. So that is another area here. So I think the driver here, to understand UAE policy, there are 2-3 drivers here. Number one is we are in a geoeconomic, geotechnological phase. Number two is we don't work without partners. We are not a solo flyer. We are not big enough to be a solo flyer. Number three is we value our traditional relationship, whether they are the United States, which is cardinal, or Europe, but we also think in terms of strategic autonomy.
So last question. I mean, you are one of the most well-known figures in your government. You travel the world. Many people know you. Is it easier to conduct diplomacy in Washington or in Beijing?
No, I think.
And don't be diplomatic.
No. I think we have two different schools. I think the American school is an open school. I mean, a lot of our decision makers have traveled often there. They speak the language. Have gone to universities there, like myself and others. So it's a different school. But I think we're learning with China. We're learning, but in both cases there are fundamentals. And I think that those fundamentals is trust. You need to tell people in closed-door sessions what they hear publicly. You can't come and say something in closed-door sessions, and then you lose that sort of trust. You lose that sort of relationship, etc. And I think these are fundamentals that you can't change.
Wonderful. Well, on the word of trust, which is a word that is very dear to Reuters, I think we can end this session. Thank you very much for your time.
Shukran.
Really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Shukran.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you, Alessandra. An apt and important conversation to start this day of discussion. And themes, by the way, we will come back to throughout the day. His Excellency talked at the end there about Africa. We will, of course, hear from Nigeria's foreign minister a little later this morning. We turn our attention now to how countries here in the GCC are leveraging their economic heft and their strategic geography to assert a growing influence on the world stage. His Excellency Ahmed Jassim Al-Zabi is chair of the Abu Dhabi Department of Economic Development. He will be in conversation with Paul Bascobert, president at Reuters. If you could both come up, please.
Well, welcome, first of all. In addition to being the chairman of the Abu Dhabi Department of Economic Development, you are also the chairman of the Abu Dhabi Global Markets You are the chairman of the Abu Dhabi Chamber of Commerce. You chair the Abu Dhabi Investment Office. You oversee the Customs and Conformity Council. You're a very busy man. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul, and thank you for having me here. Just want to say I'm not as exciting as Dr. Anwar was, so and not as articulate, probably, as he is, but I'll try my best.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'd like to begin with the conversation that Alessandra introduced at the beginning of the day, which is we find ourselves in a world that is reconsidering long-held alliances and partnerships around the world. We find ourselves in a time when some of the best and brightest talent is reconsidering where to build their next startup, where to start their next research center. And against this storm, we find UAE, Abu Dhabi is an oasis of stability, of investment. You have built some of the most comprehensive economic partnerships in the region. You have incubators, you have listed companies. It would seem that you're very fortunate to be in this point in time, but it's not an accident. It's the results of many years of planning. So maybe we could start by going back to the early 1970s and the long-term vision that was put in place at the time. And has it played out as you expected? What's been easier? What's been more difficult?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they see the UAE or Abu Dhabi in specific, they assume that probably it came recently, but it started with a vision by the founding father, the late Sheikh Zayed, and in the 60s he had a vision of creating a country that was called the United Arab Emirates. There were 7 different emirates working in solo, and accordingly in the early 1970s or 1971, December 2nd, this is when he inaugurated the UAE with the other founding fathers. It took this one man to actually ensure that he brings 7 emirates together for one vision. At that point, where the UAE was and where the human capital in Abu Dhabi was very different. It was a dry sponge that wanted to actually suck any kind of knowledge and education to be where they want to be today. So they had a vision, they had a view of creating a country that is resilient, a country that is tolerant, a country that has a vision, that has ambitions, and a country that can be an economic hub and a financial hub globally. That vision was very successful, and years later, in around the mid-2000s, another vision came to fruition, which is basically how do we get out of that conundrum of being in an oil-based country to a more diversified country, and in the mid of the 2000s, that's when a new vision by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the President of the UAE, we went about diversifying the economy. We need to remember that till the late 90s, the UAE and Abu Dhabi in specific was 20% non-oil and 80% oil. As we speak today, the last quarter, we have 57% of our GDP being non-oil and 43% being oil. And that's really turning the economic pyramid on its head. We're probably, hopefully in the future, we're heading to a more 80% non-oil, 20% oil, and that's for the future. So that's in the 2000s. The third pivotal historical economical inflection point for the UAE and Abu Dhabi was actually COVID. During COVID is where everyone around the world got exposed in terms of where they are. No indices, no specific ratings. It was all out in the open. If the index says you're the best in human rights, if the index says you're the best in quality of life, if the index says you're the best in healthcare, it got exposed during COVID. And that's when the UAE realized we're actually on top of a lot of this. We are ahead of everyone. None of this indexed indices that actually kind of covered a lot of the deficiencies in a lot of economies across the globe, but it actually exposed the best out there and actually zeroed in into actually where others have actually been maybe in a situation where those kind of matrices help them to actually be not as exposed as one would think. So at that point, we realized we're actually ahead. And that's when we actually thought we actually are at a point where we actually are able to lead, because we've got the human capital, we've got the ambition, and we've got the infrastructure. And we have a view on the world that is very different than a lot of other economies. So that's kind of the three major phases of the economy of the UAE and Abu Dhabi.
Well, let's talk more about the 57% of the non-oil-based economic activity. Tell us a little bit about the investment focus and what investors and businesses in the region need to know about the opportunities in this region.
The most important thing to know is that the UAE and Abu Dhabi is a place where we want to do business. However, the cornerstones of us doing business is always built on a very, very specific DNA within Abu Dhabi, which is partnerships. We believe in partnerships. If you look at the two major historical pillars, economic pillars of Abu Dhabi, when I talk about the juggernaut in ADNOC and the behemoth in ADIA, you really talk about two entities that were built on partnerships. So that's number one. And then we've added to that Mubadala, ADQ, and others, and of course the private sector players that we have currently. So all of that is based on partnerships. So one, if someone comes here, expect that we're going to be very open to actually partnering and doing business. Two, we're very open to new ideas. We're very open to actually dipping our toes into risky waters sometimes when it comes to financial services or businesses in general. So and number four is whoever comes and invests here will be on a train which is a diversification train, which means we're going to start looking at a wider array of clusters and sectors. We'll be going into more complex sectors within the economic complexity spectrum, and this is very important. Another thing is for investors to know, the regulatory frameworks and the regulatory environment in the UAE and Abu Dhabi is very different than a lot of countries. It's way faster, way more flexible, and way more willing to listen to others when it comes to consultation of ideas. And that's very important for us to actually continue growing, and we're going to continue that trajectory, I have no doubt.
Well, on the clusters that you mentioned, there's three that I think you've decided to focus on. Autonomous vehicles, and I should mention that I took an autonomous vehicle from the airport on my way here, so which it worked wonderfully. I'm here. Agricultural tech, health and longevity are three areas that you've decided to focus on. And tell us more about why those three and what people should look for.
Well, we've announced three, but in reality we have 13. So we've got the autonomous vehicles, we've got the agricultural and health also clusters, and there's more. There's financial services, which we're going to continue to focus on, chemicals, minerals. We're going to continue doing, obviously, AI and digital infrastructure is going to continue being there. Manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, we're going to continue doing that. And obviously, the oil sector with its downstream will always be a pivotal sector within the economy. Hence, if you realize, we went through an exercise of saying, out of all the sectors that we have, where do we believe, which was around, we pinpointed around the population of 180 sectors, let's say, around the world. So out of the 180 sectors, where do we actually believe we have the right to play? This was the first question. And out of those, we went down to around 100. And then we said, out of the 100, where do we believe we have the right to win? And out of the 100, we went down to 13. And those 13 sectors or clusters are the clusters that we're going to continue focusing on. But they're also way more complex clusters and sectors than what we used to do. It's not an input-output. It's more of an input, and there's a lot of processing within that, and then there's an output. So if you look at autonomous vehicles, it's not only about the vehicle itself. It's about the technology that comes into it, the AI that comes to it, the recognition, the face recognitions, the object recognitions, the different technologies that comes, the programming that comes into it, the kind of talent that actually is going to pull just by that sector. If you look at the food sector, again, the same thing. It goes into supply chains and specifically looking at specific, for example, protein alternatives, alternative proteins, protein fermentation, for example, and looking at those things and what's the trajectory of that going forward. Health, for example, there's a lot of focus on life expectancy and a lot of focus on longevity and health and etc. We believe in the UAE and Abu Dhabi in specific, we're in a very strong position now to actually compete on that level. We have more than 1 million genomic data, okay? We have, and it's a very diversified genomic database, you know, and which means that you've got, because in the UAE, you've got around close to 200 nationalities, 180 plus. So the diversity in actually the genomic data. Another thing, the data sets that we have in terms of healthcare, and what the guys here in Abu Dhabi and the Department of Health has done is a brilliant job of actually putting that out there. And that data is not only knowledge, but it's also wealth. And that wealth helps us to actually springboard to other areas, and hence why a lot of the healthcare institutions and the pharmaceuticals are extremely interested in what we have today, because of the kind of data that we have and we possess here in Abu Dhabi, and that's going to help prolong people's lives, or I wouldn't say prolong people's life because the longevity crowd will be upset about that. I would think better people's life during which they're on that earth. You know.
Well, you know, part of this is attracting and developing the entrepreneurial, the entrepreneurs of the future and the talents of the future. I know you've talked quite a bit about the importance of culture as a part of this. We sit close to some of the top universities in the world and some of the top cultural centers in the world. You've built Hub 71, which is a focus on entrepreneurship. Maybe can you say more about what you're trying to do with Hub 71 in terms of attracting talent and motivating entrepreneurs?
With what we've realized is that entrepreneurs would usually go to places where they believe they can grow. And we believe the UAE and Abu Dhabi is a place where they can grow. And the idea of Hub 71 came from that belief that entrepreneurs would want to go to places where they can be supported, they can be understood, and they can be helped to actually grow. And we want that to happen. Building Hub 71 for the past couple of years, we have around 400, close to 400 startups. 60% of them are actually not from the UAE. We've raised billions for them. We've supported them to grow. There will be more and more unicorns coming out of Hub 71. Just like financial services, just like funds, it's not anymore portfolio managers following where the funds are. It's funds following where the portfolio managers actually want to live. If a portfolio manager wants to stay in Abu Dhabi, and a very successful portfolio manager, I can assure you that most of whether funds or hedge funds would want to set up just for those portfolio managers in Abu Dhabi. And that's something that I will see also in entrepreneurship. The thing that entrepreneurs are also excited about is that Abu Dhabi is going into sectors that is exciting and interesting for them. And for example, one of the most important parts that a lot of them are excited about is the AI part. And the question is, how do we help them today use that connectivity that we have with the different AI community globally to actually support them here to grow? And that's the important part, and that's how they see us today, is how do we actually support them in different matters, not only in AI, but also, let's say, regulations. How do you actually ensure that if someone comes up with a business, that today there is a regulatory vacuum, how are you as Abu Dhabi going to support them in actually covering that and helping them with actually creating a regulatory framework that is helpful for them? So that's why entrepreneurs are coming to the UAE. That's why entrepreneurs are coming to Abu Dhabi. It's exciting. They see today, they see that there are dreams that can be achieved in Abu Dhabi, and we're happy that that's the case.
I see we have a couple of questions, and we have just a few minutes. If we could, I'll just read the questions. Is Abu Dhabi involved in data centers? Is this a priority?
I mean, if you want to compete at the global level, you would need to be able to actually have the infrastructure to actually compete. And I just want to say that given where we are today economically, globally, I do not believe that countries with the highest populations or the biggest populations or bigger populations are going to be the ones leading the economical engine going forward. I believe that the countries with the biggest computation power will actually lead the economical engines across the world. Hence, being in AI, being in data centers, being in all of that is very important to Abu Dhabi and very important to us.
Well, I think that leads to the second question. How will AI change the economy of Abu Dhabi? And how is the Department of Economic Development driving AI?
It's already changing the economy in Abu Dhabi, as I said. If you look at the use cases that we have today, if you look at the government application, the central government application, which is TEM, this is a use case for a lot of different countries to look at. Today, the newer version that we've just launched is an AI-enabled version. You do not need to do things anymore. AI will do it for you. That's only on the government level. If you look at healthcare, for example, if God forbid one calls and says, I've got a heart attack, I've got a stroke, it takes the ambulance 6 minutes to get to that place. Within those 6 minutes, if we didn't have the data sets that we have and the power of the data that we have and the power of AI, the paramedics would not be prepared as and when they reach there in 6 minutes. So how did AI help? Once that paramedic jumps on that ambulance, he or she would get an automatic summary telling them what to expect, how do we do things, what's happening with the patient, and what's the best course of action. That's the use case that one would look at to save lives. That's what we're looking at. Those are the things that we're looking at. So looking at how do we actually help economies and human capital within the country is very important to us, and that's going to continue to be so.
Well, I know we only have just a minute left. I have one last question. Thinking forward now, 10 years into the future, it's Gulf Next 10th anniversary, and we're sitting here talking about the progress. What are your hopes, and where do you see things in 10 years?
I think we'll be sitting in Disneyland, in 10 years. So probably the characters won't be the same. Probably you'll be dressed differently, I'm not sure, But I think in 10 years, I just want to picture something for people. In 10 years, we're going to have Disney up and running. We're going to have the Sphere up and running. We're going to have the museums, the cultural district up and running. Our current plan for the aggressive infrastructure that we're building will be up and running. We'll have more universities, top universities. We'll have a stronger human capital in the UAE. We'll have a very diversified economy, very exciting different exciting sectors within the UAE and in Abu Dhabi. And so, if you think, and we're going to have a very strong financial hub, that's for sure, in ADGM, which is also one of the things that I think we haven't spoken about, but you know, it's also a cornerstone of the economic fabric of Abu Dhabi. But yeah, and we're probably going to be ahead at that time. We'll be leading at that time. We are leading in some areas, and I think we will continue to be the safest city in the world. We will continue to be one of the smartest cities in the world. We will continue to be the happiest city in the world, you know, and maybe I'll look younger because, you know, I'm gonna, you know, I hope I'll look younger in 10 years, you know, based on the guys who spoke to me about longevity and you know, so there's a magic pill apparently, you know.
There's hope for us all.
So that's what I hope.
Wonderful. Well, Your Excellency, thank you for your time, and
pleasure.
look forward to the conversation in 10 years.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. Thank you very much to Paul as well. By the way, if you are registered for the Future of News session, which starts roundabout now, that happens on the Catalyst stage. It'll say FON at the bottom of your badges. We don't want you to leave this room, but if you are keen to go to that Future of News session, head over there now. Here on the world stage, our first panel of the day asks, what is the MENA region's role in a new world order? Who are the leaders shaping the region's future? I can think of no one better to lead this discussion than Samia Nakul, a well-known face and a well-known voice here in the region, and Reuters Global Foreign Policy Editor. Samia, come on up, and she will introduce her panel once they're all up here.
Welcome and thank you for joining this important discussion. What's next? MENA's role in a new world order. As you know, we're living in a world now, you know, with huge global change, from shifting power centers to the growing danger of climate change. And right in the middle of it, you know, the Middle East stands at a real crossroad. It's no longer just looking what's happening elsewhere in the world. It's about shaping what comes next. And I'm delighted to have here three distinguished voices. From the UAE, we have Her Excellency Minister of State Lana Nusseibeh, who over the past 20 years has been the rising voice of the UAE on the global stage, shaping policy with conviction, vision, and ambition. First, through her role as UN ambassador, and now into her current role and special envoy to Pakistan and Afghanistan. And lately, she's been involved in negotiation to reach a peace deal on Gaza, which luckily we had a ceasefire. You know, Lana's leadership and her commitment to gender equality, international dialogue, and cooperation has been a model and an inspiration to women, not only in the UAE, but across the Arab world, and who really look at her in admiration for her charisma, determination, and resolve. So thank you. And from Saudi Arabia, we have Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Sakr, the founder of the Gulf Research Center, which is a think tank of global reach and influence. It focuses basically on Gulf and Arab affairs. Actually, my relationship with Dr. Abdulaziz, they started here in the UAE 25 years ago. And we were craving for independent, insightful, and sober news and analysis. And he and his center fit that gap, and he continues to do so until now. His center not only provides trusted analysis and insight and information, but also shapes policy and provides solutions for some of our pertinent problems in this region. And from the IMF, we have Dr. Jihad Azzour, a distinguished economist and public servant. He is currently the director of the IMF for the Middle East and Central Asia, a region with immense complexity, but again with immense promise. As Lebanon finance minister, he led some critical economic reforms which were badly needed for Lebanon, and we need more of that. And his name was put forward as a candidate for Lebanon's presidential election in 2022, 2025. And again, it reflects the trust in his leadership and his vision. His contribution to economic development and governance were widely recognized through the prestigious award Chevalier dans l'Ordre National de la Légion d'Honneur. Again, a testament for his commitment and for his impact in this region and beyond. So thank you again, wa ahla wa sahla. And I'm going to start with Jihad, معلش مع حفظ الألقاب, because the meeting of the IMF and the World Bank just happened, and they came out with praised resilience of global economy and regional economy, including MENA, despite all the shocks and all the uncertainty. But they warned of risks that are lingering. So can you tell us from your perspective, what key priorities came out for the MENA region from this meeting?
Sanya, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for organizing this important event. Of course, this year is a year where when you line up the events and you see the outcome, you see some dichotomy between both. We went through various shocks: geopolitical tension, geoeconomic fragmentation, trade and tariff tension, in addition to the geopolitical issues in the region, including a flare-up of conflict during the year. Despite that, when we look at the global outlook for this year, and in particular for the region, we see that the region was resilient. Growth has been upgraded compared to our projections back in April, and we are seeing growth this year. And this growth is led by many factors and many countries. Of course, a certain number of sectors have performed well, like tourism, like trade, innovation, and technology, which has led, especially in the GCC, the diversification process, but also a certain number of other factors. But this was not only an improvement in growth. A certain number of issues also, or certain number of economic indicators improved. Inflation, despite certain number of countries where inflation is still high, is improving, and access to financial markets has been restored. Yet there are risks, and I think we need to recognize the importance of those risks in order to prepare for the future. This resilience comes with still a very high level of uncertainty. And the issue with uncertainty, it could hit you with time. So far, I would say things have been limited in terms of impact because the tariff measures were limited on the region, and the trade connection with the US is relatively limited. But the level of uncertainty can come with a certain number of other developments. If inflation goes up, or if we see additional tension among the various blocs, this could have an impact on the region. The other issue is the volatility we could see in the oil price. Despite the increase in supply, despite the softening of the oil price, the increase in supply was, at the result, positive to the region in terms of the impact economically. But this could have an impact on the current account, which means on the reserves, as well as also on the fiscal situation. Three, the tension that exists with the various conflicts was relatively limited in terms of its spillover regionally, but this is an issue that we need to keep an eye on. What does it mean, and to answer your question in terms of what are the priorities? The first priority, I think, because there is a flip to this coin, which is the high level of opportunities that the region could have today, is A, to start with strengthening the resilience, which means to make sure that the fundamentals are strong. In the case of the GCC, is to keep the path of diversification and gradually building the economy from the oil cycle, keep inflation low. For other countries, is to address that issue, as well as also in certain number of cases, the size of the public sector. This is first. Stability comes first. Second, you need to transform. There are opportunities today. What we see in the world opens a new chapter in terms of multilateralism. Some would say post-multilateralism. But this is something that is important for the region, who is playing the role of a connector. New trade routes, new connection with neighboring regions is an opportunity for this part of the world. 3, the tectonic shifts, and technology is really one. AI, technology, cryptocurrencies, all these developments are going to shape up our future, the near future, and we need to be ready for that. I'm happy to see that, for example, in terms of AI readiness, 3 countries in the region are among the top performers in the world: UAE, Saudi, and Qatar. We need more. Therefore, we need to get ready for all these transformations and benefit from them. And for that, we need to think about 2 important elements that I would like to add to this equation. Is how to increase inclusion in the economy. We have a young generation that still, in terms of access to market, access to job market, still not faring very well. And we need to address that. Addressing that is by creating jobs, opening opportunities for startup SMEs, and this requires by increasing access to finance, improving business environment. We need also to increase women's participation in the economy. I think this is one of the big boosters that the region can have. We did a calculation that if you increase women's participation in the region to the average EMs, we can get $1 trillion of additional output. This is very important. And this also will help us increase productivity in the region. And 3, I think rising up from ashes is something that the region needs to focus on. The post-conflict strategy needs to be laid out. In our outlook this year, we dedicated a chapter to that. How you succeed emerging from conflicts or from instability. What are the lessons learned from successes and failure? And there are important milestones to be achieved very quickly in terms of stabilizing the economy, strengthening the process of rebuilding institutions, and scaling up support, both public and private sector. I would encourage everyone to read it because I think this is going to be one of the challenges of the region going forward, but also could be transformed into opportunities. My last point is we have to recognize that, especially here in the Gulf, we have one of the few bright spots in 2025. And we need to build on it. Building on it is doubling down on investment in technology, investing in people, doubling down on having this region playing the role of connector. And I think this is something that has huge potential. I cover a region where I see opportunities between, for example, GCC and Central Asia, a region that is growing at 6% despite the war between Russia and Ukraine. With Africa, I think Dr. Gargash was mentioning that. There's huge potential. And this part of the world is becoming the node where many decision makers could come and interact. Therefore, I think we have to be very careful on how to manage this transition. But I think we need to shift a bit our policy framework in order to succeed and benefit from that.
Yeah, Lana, the IMF spoke about diversification and resilience. How is the UAE using diplomacy to navigate external shocks and regional conflicts, which are many in this part of the world?
Thank you, Samia, and I'd like to actually pick up on a number of the data points that Jihad so brilliantly outlined in order to look at answering that question of how the UAE is weathering what looks like an accelerated fragmentation over the last 2 years. But really, if you look at the preparation that made this economy so resilient, it's perhaps the last decade where we've seen this slow fragmentation from the post-Cold War era and order to a diversified geopolitics, geoeconomics, and geotechnological shift in the global order. So the multilateral institutions, the fragmentation in what we define as our collective norms and understandings. And in the last 2 years, obviously an acceleration because of actual major conflicts between with big powers on either side of that, from Russia and Ukraine to Gaza to Sudan, Yemen, Libya, Syria. There are a number of conflict points in the region. If we take a step back and look at polling in the Arab region, and Jihad, you pointed out under 30% of the region is under 25, and that's really our market when we look at what we're trying to build here in the UAE. It's the lens for how we look at our economic diversification and development. So despite the last 2 years of accelerated fragmentation, The IMF has shown 4% growth in our GDP in 2024, 4.8% in 2024, and predicted for 2025 an increase on that.
Yes.
So I think despite fragmentation, you are looking at solid economic growth in the UAE. So how did we do that? 70,000 plus new companies have opened up in the UAE over the past 2 years alone. And when you speak about AI, our competitiveness index shows that we are the number 3 globally for attracting global talent in AI here in the UAE. There's a very interesting study. We've seen the polling over 10 to 12 years now, where the youth that I was speaking about in the Arab region have consistently chosen the UAE as their number 1 destination. If they could pick a place to immigrate to and live and work and thrive, it is the UAE over countries in Europe, over the United States. And I think that's a really important data point. Why is that population of under 30s choosing the UAE as the model where they see a state structure that works, a regulatory environment that works, a political system that works, and a laser focus on delivery for both citizens and residents alike? And I think that's how we have weathered the shocks and how we use diplomacy to weather the shocks. First of all, in our diplomatic efforts, we are pragmatic, we are solution-oriented. We look at being the connecting point, the connector hub to diplomatic differences. We're looking at diversified portfolios, not only of energy and economics and geopolitics, but also technology and AI. And we're looking to be a place of convening mediation efforts for these difficult conflicts, because we understand we cannot be an island. And in order for us to thrive, we need other countries around us to be stable. So we have long taken the position, and this is something that I think in our part of the world is a benefit, a net benefit of being stable political systems. We've long taken the position that just allowing conflicts to continue unresolved, not finding the solution to those conflicts, has been a strategic mistake in the international community. Let's take a look at maritime trade, which has disrupted 30% of container traffic, 10% of global energy and oil and gas both, and has caused a lot of shocks for consumers and for shipping and for international economies. If we look at that, as Dr. Anwar Gargash outlined in the first session, we were immediately with Saudi Arabia outlining that the Houthis would be a problem in Yemen in 2015 and that we needed to deal with this because maritime shipping in the Red Sea was a strategic core interest, not only of our region, but for the international community. And I think now we see 10 years later what has come to pass as a result of not resolving that conflict. If we look at Gaza, October 7th, and the resulting horrific war in Gaza, again, you see root causes of not dealing with non-state actors in our region, not dealing with political instability in those countries. And I think I'll end with that for why we took the decision to sign the Abraham Accords 5 years ago. It was about trying to change mindsets in our region with radical change in thinking that looked to the future, that looked to speaking to that 30% of the region's population that are under 25 with a new vision of peace, coexistence, and tolerance anchored in economic stability. And I think building and providing those economic opportunities has been how we have built in the resilience, whether in our energy, in our economy, and also in our geopolitics, diversifying our relationships across the spectrum from Asia to Africa to the Americas, so between the US and China. We have excellent relations both economically but also strategically with India, where we signed a free trade agreement and saw our trade with that country improve by 30% year on year since its signing. And it was negotiated, by the way, in 81 days. And I will end with that point. In a state of the world where fragmentation is the norm, where you're seeing an erosion of one multilateral system that governs the international space, diplomatic agility and entrepreneurship is key in that space. And I think that's, I'm proud to have represented the foreign ministry for over 2 decades in this space, because I think where creative entrepreneurship in diplomacy is needed, the UAE has shown that, whether it's mediating over 5,000 prisoner exchanges between Russia and Ukraine, whether it's being, as Dr. Gargash has outlined, a key partner with the Arab region, but also with the United States and with Israel, using the Abraham Accords to help achieve this ceasefire in Gaza that was so desperately needed. And whether it's now in dealing for a comprehensive regional security architecture that stabilizes our region and allows us to build out to the next generation of economy and geopolitics. That's the space we see ourselves contributing to as one of many players.
Thanks. Dr. Abdulaziz, talking about diversification, Saudi Arabia from BRICS to IMEC to widening its mediation role in the Middle East, and at the same time juggling relations with the US and China. Is this a rewriting of power politics, or is it a balancing act as a strategy for survival?
Well, Sami, it's nice to be invited to Reuters conference. I'm so happy to be in Abu Dhabi, as always. Let me start by saying, yes, Saudi Arabia, one of its pillars in the new policies is diversification in the partnership. They have been invited to the BRICS, but they have not yet accepted to join the BRICS. And I think the reason for that is two. One, they do have an excellent relation to most of the BRICS members. At the same time, they wanted to see the real formalization of the BRICS and how they're going to function as an institutional and what sort of added value that will bring to them. But yes, they have accepted to go on the IMEC. They are part of the G20. And they do play their roles in terms of regional and international side. Yes, the relation with the US is since 1930s, when the oil was explored and founded in Saudi Arabia. But at the same time, the relation with China, and I remember, I feel very proud that I was the first Saudi, 23rd of October 1981, visited Peking. And at that time, there was no direct flight to Peking, so I had to fly to Tokyo. And from Tokyo, I take the BIA, the Pakistan Airways, to Peking. So it was an interesting time, seeing. But the relation have developed after the 91. Today, we are almost $110 billion trade relation between Saudi Arabia and China, primarily because 22% of our oil export goes to China, so China is the largest buyer, and they're the biggest trading partner after, with Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Gulf countries. I think next to it, the EU comes into that. But the EU, the energy does not represent a very small percentage of the trade relations. So if you take out the energy from the Chinese, but still, our relation to China is a buyer and seller. China is not a key player when it comes to the regional security issue here. U.S. remain are the most important player when it comes to that. The Gulf region have built up the regional security based on two things: building their own capacity, enhancing their forces, centralization of command, and decentralization of forces. So we have, through the GCC, we have a centralization of command, but decentralization of the forces. But yet, the U.S. and the second pillar of that, of course, the strong relation that we have with the U.S. and some of the West countries like Britain, France, Italy, and their also support, presence in the region. But the U.S. remain to be the most important one when it comes to the security region. I think Saudi have adopted the sort of balanced, neutral relation, independency, but at the same time, and I think as Her Excellency Lana said, when it comes to Russia-Ukraine crisis, the Gulf countries have contributed. UAE alone contributed to the release of more than 4,600 prisoners. Qatar have contributed to also to the children issues there. Saudi did humanitarian part and also some of the exchange of prisoners on the beginning. But again, we wanted to maintain the balanced relation. We don't want to cut our relation with Russia, yet we have never accepted any aggression and we have always condemned the aggression against the Ukraine. And we supported humanitarian as much as we can and dealt as an honest, broker with both. So I think it's not a shifting, but at the same time, we hope the U.S. Will understand, the value of the importance of the relation that we have with them, and they need to ensure the region of their commitment to the security of the region since they have started in the 40s early.
Thank you. Lana, I'm going to ask you, the UAE has also positioned itself as a bridge between, East and West. How sustainable is this role given the global polarization now? And sorry, we're conscious of time because I want to leave questions. There is so many questions from the audience.
As quickly as possible then, to fully support what Dr. Sagar said, I think all the Gulf countries have played an important bridge-building role in a difficult geo-fractured environment, and he's demonstrated that. I think also, if you look in terms of impact on the UAE, we still remain a very important connector point between East and West. Something like a plane is landing and taking off every 40 seconds in the UAE. Our ports are one of the top 10 trading ports globally. 150 million passengers still coming to the UAE, and that number, the population continues to grow because we remain a vital connecting hub. In the space of AI, $1.4 trillion framework of investment with the United States to develop AI data hubs outside of the US here using US technology. And if you look at our connectivity in terms of trade and economic routes, that is soon going to be a very important connector hub also in the field of AI and AI data expansion across different continents from Africa to Asia. So I think our historic role as a trading community is also going to be next generation, a historic connecting bridge role in terms of AI, and that's very much how we're focusing in terms of our investments in Europe as well with France and Italy and others. So we are a connecting point. That is part and parcel of how we remain a vital economy. And in the field of diplomacy, as I said in my opening remarks, I think it's important that we have peace and security and stability for that to happen. So we're very much focused on solving long-term conflicts, and that's where all our diplomacy is now currently.
I'm going to start with the audience question. Thank you, Lana. The GCC government and for you, Jihad, are simultaneously investing heavily, sorry, I cannot see, heavily while drawing down reserves. How should they balance investment-led diversification with fiscal prudence?
Yeah. It's a very important question. I would tackle it in 3 points. One, over the last few years, we saw that the diversification strategy in the GCC paying off. Despite the various shocks, if I take only since 2020, but I can go even to the 2015 onward with the oil shock at that time. But since COVID and onward, we see that what is driving growth is the non-oil sector. And it's a genuine investment in not only by public investment, but also by building the foundations of modern economies, competitive economies. Now, in most of the GCC, if you take the case of the UAE, the size of the non-oil sector is dominant by far. And even the indirect role of the oil and gas sector is limited. What is driving this, it's not only investment, and I think this is something that we need to underscore, it's also reforms. If I take the case of Saudi Arabia, reforms that were introduced increased women participation between 2018 and now from 16% to something like 37%, 6 years ahead of 2030, which was set as a target. Unemployment at the record low currently, especially in UAE and in Saudi, especially at the youth level. Therefore, reforms pay. Investment, of course, investment are needed. And if I take the case of technology, AI, it's definitely one of the strategic plays that the region can bank on. In AI, you need energy, you need capital, and you need talent. And you have now the 3 of them available here. Of course, when you do investment programming, sometimes you need to recalibrate or to rephase. But I think what is also important to mention that over the last years in the Gulf, we see a clear policy of diversifying revenues outside oil, also for the state. And we see fiscal policies put into medium-term fiscal frameworks, trying to de-link the fiscal cycle with the oil cycle, and to be less pro-cyclical, as it was the case before. What does it mean going forward? It means that this journey of transformation has to continue. Now it has to go into 2 important directions. There are still a lot of values to integrate regionally. Integrating regionally trade, but also financial services. Deepening the financial markets is an important milestone in order to make capital available and to scale up. Also, increasing or reducing the barriers that exist between countries will increase the size of the market. I think this is an important milestone that the region can aspire to, especially, which is my second point, we are in a world of fragmentation. Connectivity becomes very important, and the region can be connected. And to become really a strong connector as an emerging power, working together, coordinating together, will have an important impact.
Thank you. And my last question to you, Dr. Abdulaziz. We have all this Israel, Gaza, the tensions that we're witnessing, the Yemen crisis, the shadow of the Gaza war, and how is your country and other countries, do you think, in this region, the Gulf, managing volatility, especially that you have all this project about investment? What is at stake for growth, investment, and your vision with all this, what's going on? And we have very short time, so...
All the Gulf countries are in support of de-escalation, finding a political solution, resolving the problem amicably. That's a key issue. So we're not in support of any escalation or war or continuation. Second, reconstruction in Gaza would require, first, stopping the war. Second, implementing, even by gradual step, what has been agreed in the plan. And third, giving the assurance that we don't want to go and finance and reconstruct Gaza and then tomorrow they go and destroy it. Dr. Anwar Gargash mentioned that how much UAE have contributed more than $2 billion only on the last 2 years, to the situation there. So what we are looking for is a serious guarantor, and the only one that can and should do is the U.S. If the U.S. really provide the guarantor that, and they are the guarantor that the Israeli will not destroy the building and the people, and they will stop the killing, and there will be a civil society and a proper local administration to run the issue there. We're not talking about militarization of Hamas. We're not talking about endorsing